Brenda spent her entire childhood lost in romantic reverie, seeing herself as a girl whose heart was happy but sad at the same time. The source of her sorrow was the fact that she grew up without parents, a deeply painful and unfortunate circumstance. Thankfully, she found joy in the care of her grandparents, who were the only family she had. Even they knew nothing about Brenda's father, as she was born out of wedlock to the only daughter of Mrs. and Mr. Booth. Her birth was meant to be a joyous event, with her parents hoping that it would encourage their daughter, who had been living recklessly, to settle down and become responsible. At first, it seemed like their hope had come true, but when Brenda was only a year old, her young mother started talking about her personal life and the need to earn money, and soon after disappeared from Brenda's life when she was not even 2 years old. Left as a complete orphan, Brenda found solace in her grandparents' care, whom she considered her greatest blessing. They loved her unconditionally and indulged her to the point of making up for their only daughter's mistakes in parenting. Brenda saw her mother only in pictures, a young, cheerful, and stunningly beautiful woman, and held on to hope that she would return someday. However, her grandparents were reluctant to talk about her mother, leaving Brenda to imagine her fate and create her own version of the truth. But as time went on, the girl grew up, and her mother never came back. Now Brenda was grown up, and she remained the same romantic, dreamy girl. Mr. and Mrs. Booth shared a dream for their granddaughter to receive a good education and pursue a prestigious profession, which Brenda was not opposed to. She proved to be capable and quick-witted, effortlessly gaining admission to the institute. However, it became apparent that her education would present challenges. The Booth family had always lived modestly, and Mr. Booth's declining health made it even more difficult to make ends meet. Despite retiring, he continued to work until he was eventually forced to quit. Mrs. Booth also had to give up her job to care for her husband. It was impossible for the three of them to live on 2 pensions, so Brenda made a decision. "Grandma, I've decided to enroll in a correspondence course," Brenda announced. "It's actually quite convenient. I can work and study at the same time and still receive a paycheck." "Well, Brenda, I suppose that's the only way," replied her grandmother. "Your grandfather's pension barely covers his medication expenses, and as a young adult, you have your own needs. You can't survive on pasta and potatoes alone, only if not to the detriment of study." "I understand, Grandma. Don't worry, I won't give up on my education," Brenda reassured her. "As for work, the mother of one of my former classmates owns a decent cafe and has agreed to take me on as a waitress for an internship. I'll learn the ropes and eventually work there. The salary is reasonable, and I can also earn tips." Her grandmother seemed disheartened, lamenting that she and her grandfather could not provide Brenda with a better life. "Don't say that, Grandma," Brenda protested. "I am grateful to you both, and I would be happy even if I had grown up in an orphanage. I am turning 20 soon, and it's time for me to help take care of you. It's what any responsible child would do. Please don't be upset." Brenda made the decision to switch to a part-time job and work at a cafe to improve her financial situation, but it made studying more challenging. Her schedule became tighter as she had less free time and had to travel long distances with transfers, which caused significant changes in her life. One day, while passing through an underpass, Brenda heard captivating music from a street musician. The musician, a handsome young man, sat in front of an open guitar case, occasionally receiving spare change from passers-by. Some people rushed by, while others stopped to appreciate his singing. Brenda was drawn to the musician's mesmerizing voice and listened intently as he sang one beautiful but slightly melancholic song after another. She forgot about her need to hurry and simply enjoyed the moment. "Hello," he noticed the girl's interest, paused, and turned to Brenda. "Did you enjoy it?" he asked with a bashful smile. "I loved it. You're such a fantastic singer," Brenda replied, setting down a bill in his guitar case. "You just made my day. Your music will stay with me for a long time." When will you be performing again? She asked curiously. I'm not sure. I don't get to perform in public very often. I had a free minute today and wanted to make some money, the guy chuckled. Anyway, that's enough for today. Let me walk you for a bit. Are you on your way to work? He asked, quickly packing up his things. Yes, I'm actually running late. I work in a cafe nearby, Brenda replied. Yes, I'm actually running late. I work in a cafe nearby, Brenda replied. Well, I was actually hoping to invite you for coffee. Donald laughed. By the way, my name is Donald Johns, he introduced himself. I'm Brenda Booth. Maybe another time. Do you work somewhere? Brenda asked. Not currently. I used to, but I quit. I hope you don't think I'm begging or anything, Donald replied. I don't think that at all. You're working hard, and you sing incredibly well. You could be on stage, Brenda said, impressed. I actually graduated from a music college. Maybe I could have pursued a career in music, but I lacked talent, money, connections, and support, so nothing worked out on stage. I sing sometimes at corporate events and sometimes on the streets when I have to, Donald explained. Let's exchange phone numbers. Maybe we could meet up sometime, Brenda suggested. They quickly exchanged contact information, and Brenda had to rush off to work. She wasn't sure yet if she would go out with Donald, but there was something about him that intrigued her. You're late, Brenda, her boss scolded her. I'm sorry, it was an accident. Brenda quickly changed into her uniform and replied. I was listening to this street musician. He sang so beautifully, you wouldn't believe it. If we had live music, it would be such a great addition. Come on, he's just a street musician. What do we need him for? Her boss replied dismissively. No, he's young, around 20, good-looking, and he doesn't look like he drinks, Brenda explained. Well, if he's good-looking, I guess I see your point, her boss chuckled. Now go to the gym, you hopeless romantic. As Brenda went to work, she couldn't stop thinking about her new acquaintance. She couldn't deny that he was handsome, and there was nothing wrong with admiring that. He was slim, well-built, with long, well-groomed blonde hair, big blue eyes, and a pleasant voice. Will he call or not? I'm not going to make the first move. Let him call, she thought. Her heart leaped with joy when Donald finally called. They started dating and soon moved in together. However, the relationship wasn't the only thing that changed. When Donald first visited Brenda at work, everyone noticed him. Her boss discovered that he was a talented musician and believed he could attract more customers to the cafe. She invited him to perform one night, and he was a hit. Soon, he landed a permanent job at the cafe, and he and Brenda not only lived together but worked together too. Brenda had to juggle her studies, work, and personal life, while Donald's success as a musician led to an increase in their income and expenses. Donald suggested they move out of Brenda's grandparents' house and live separately, which made Brenda unhappy. Do we have to, Donald? We have a big apartment and Grandpa and Grandma won't be a bother. It's a shame to leave them, Brenda said. But Donald insisted. Everyone lives away from their parents nowadays. I moved away from mine a long time ago, and it's no big deal. Your grandparents are too, it won't be boring, and we have to build our own lives, don't we? Reluctantly, Brenda agreed. She was dreading telling Mr. and Mrs. Booth, fearing they would start crying and begging her not to leave. However, it turned out to be a peaceful conversation. Grandpa expressed his joy for Brenda, and Grandma didn't seem too upset, just as Donald had predicted. Nowadays, it seems that the younger generation is inclined towards living independently, which is a positive development compared to when you and I had to share a room with my mother. However, the grandparents had just one request for their granddaughter, to keep in touch more often and not forget about them, which prompted the young couple to rent an apartment and take care of their own expenses. Brenda fulfilled her grandparents' wishes by visiting them frequently, providing them with food, medicine, and even financial assistance despite their reluctance to accept it. She could see that her elderly relatives were struggling, but reassured them that she and Donald were doing well, with the latter pursuing a career as a successful artist. Brenda also mentioned that her grandmother has been a regular patron of their cafe to listen to Donald's music, and the cafe owner even raised her salary in appreciation of his talent. Granddad and Granny's concerns extended beyond material matters, as they increasingly questioned their granddaughter about her relationship with her partner. "Why are you two living together without getting married, Brenda dear? Is he going to propose soon? You should hurry him along. You know how artists can be," they would ask. Brenda reassured her grandmother, saying that this was just the way things were these days, and that they would eventually tie the knot, but only at a later time. She did not want to pressure her partner into marriage, and did not see any urgency in legalizing their relationship. They were happy and content with each other, and the thought of anything going wrong was sacrilegious. As a result, Brenda avoided bringing up the topic of marriage with her partner, as she did not see it as necessary for their relationship. 2.5 years later, a special occasion arose for Brenda and Donald. She found out that she was pregnant. Upon hearing the news, Donald proposed to Brenda, and they decided to have a lavish wedding at their cafe with live music, dancing, and many guests in attendance. Despite the wedding celebrations, Brenda continued to work at the cafe, unable to take a break as her grandfather's health was rapidly deteriorating. She felt that it was not right for Donald to have to bear the financial burden of her grandfather's medical expenses. As a result, Brenda had to quit her studies in her 6th month of pregnancy. Brenda's cousin Dasha, who had been helping her grandparents, took a sabbatical leave of absence to support Brenda during her pregnancy. It was during this time that Dasha realized the benefits of living separately. She no longer had to come up with complicated lies when asked about her studies. Instead, she could simply respond truthfully that everything was fine, without feeling guilty about hiding her living situation. Brenda's pregnancy progressed relatively smoothly, although working as a waitress became increasingly challenging. She struggled to stand for extended periods and carry heavy trays, and eventually had to be transferred to the cashier's desk. This decision was made not only out of sympathy for her condition, but also out of respect for her husband, who was gaining popularity as a musician. Brenda started to feel insecure about their relationship, worrying that Donald's newfound fame could threaten their marriage. She knew that he had been sought after by young, beautiful women in the past, and now that he was becoming an urban celebrity, the attention would likely increase. However, Brenda attributed her anxieties to pregnancy-related changes and tried to remain confident in her husband. Although he was not always as attentive as before, Brenda believed that it was unfair to doubt his feelings, as he had given her no direct reason to be jealous. As Donald's musical talents began to gain recognition beyond their neighborhood, he started to receive invitations to perform at other venues, which only fueled his popularity. Despite her concerns, Brenda continued to support her husband and believed in their relationship. When Brenda was 8 months pregnant, her husband Donald and his group of musicians planned a trip to another town. Brenda expressed her concerns. "Donald, come on, I'm about to have a baby." But Donald argued, "It's just a few days, a week at the most. I will make more money in a week than in 6 months here, and we are going to need a lot. So don't worry, I'll be back soon." Despite Brenda's worries, Donald seemed more focused on earning money than being there for her during this crucial time. Brenda continued to work at the cafe, despite being heavily pregnant. Her colleagues and even her boss were outraged at her decision. Brenda explained, "I'm not due for another month. When Donald comes back from his tour, I'll go. In the meantime, I'm not used to being home alone." However, deep down, Brenda couldn't shake off the feeling that Donald's eagerness to leave was more than just about earning money. She couldn't bear the thought that her pregnancy had become an inconvenience for him. However, it was almost as if Brenda's boss had predicted. One day when Brenda arrived at work, she felt very ill. She hoped it would pass, but it only got worse. She eventually passed out, and the ambulance rushed her to the hospital. Brenda woke up in a hospital room and immediately placed her hand on her stomach. It felt unusually soft and empty, but her husband was there. "Donald, where's the baby? Is everything okay?" "Oh, honey, don't worry. It's just premature. The baby will come later. You had a cesarean. You need to rest and recover for a while. Don't worry, the baby can't come now. Take care of yourself and regain your strength. Have you seen the baby? Can you bring them to me? I just want to have a look." "Not yet, honey. I've seen the baby. They're small, but very cute, just like you." Arnold looked very pale and awkward, which made Brent feel even more excited. After he managed to calm her down, he suddenly announced that he had urgent business and left. Brenda was given a sedative and fell into a deep but restless dream. The next day, Mrs. Booth visited her and gave her a letter from Donald. The next day, Mrs. Booth came to see her, looking pale and anxious. She congratulated her on the birth of her son and tried to cheer her up by explaining that Donald was away on business. "That's understandable. Being a father for the first time," said Mrs. Booth. But Brenda realized that the reason for Donald's condition wasn't just paternity. When she took the envelope, she knew it wasn't just a congratulation. "I didn't read it until after my grandmother left." Upon receiving the envelope, Brenda already knew that it contained more than just a congratulatory letter. However, she held off on reading it until her grandmother had left. As she opened it, Brenda understood that Donald's current situation was not solely due to his parenthood. The letter began with an apology and a request for forgiveness. Donald explained that he had met a woman 6 months ago who had a significant presence in the entertainment industry. She promised him a promotion and even the possibility of making it big on stage, but with a condition: he had to live with her. Donald admitted to Brenda that he could no longer keep up the charade, and that his new companion desired a more concrete position. Although the woman was older, and there were no romantic feelings between them, she had money and influence, while he had talent. Donald hoped that Brenda would understand and accept his decision, and that he could return to his son and her when he had achieved some success. The letter ended with a sorrowful goodbye from Donald, leaving Brenda to process the shocking news on her own. Despite the fact that Brenda had just gone through a difficult birth, receiving such a message could have potentially devastated her. However, surprisingly, it brought her a sense of relief. At least now she knew the truth and that her husband's departure wasn't her fault. It was clear that Donald had chosen to abandon his family in favor of a not-so-young and lonely woman, all for some uncertain prospects of success. Brenda couldn't help but wonder if he would eventually achieve his dreams of becoming rich and famous and then try to return to her and their son. However, she was determined not to accept him back into their lives. "What a shame," she thought. "Donald could have conquered the world, but he lost me and our son forever." Now, with a small and delicate newborn to care for, Brenda's life belonged to her child, who may never get the chance to meet his father. A week after their hospital stay, Mrs. Booth and her son were released. Only Mrs. Booth's grandmother was there to greet them, as Mr. Booth had waited for them at home. This marked the start of a challenging period for Brenda. Reynold, who was born prematurely, gave his mother and great-grandmother a lot of trouble initially, but daily concerns eventually paid off. By the time he started kindergarten, the boy had grown stronger and was indistinguishable from his peers, even surpassing them in some ways. Brenda was able to return to her studies, complete her education, and secure employment. She and Donald had long since finalized their divorce without any disputes. After receiving that letter, Brenda refused to speak to the man who had betrayed her during her most difficult time. Since then, he had not been a part of her life and showed little interest in their son, occasionally sending inadequate child support payments. Despite this, Brenda was not bothered as the loss of her grandfather had been a more significant tragedy for her. Mr. Booth had been unwell for an extended period, and his passing was somewhat seen as a relief from his suffering. However, after his funeral, an even more devastating tragedy struck the family. Mrs. Booth passed away only 40 days later. While she was not young and had experienced her fair share of challenges, she had always been a vibrant and lively person. No one had expected her sudden death, and Brenda was only able to hold on for the sake of her son. At the age of 5, Reynold was deeply affected by the loss of his great-grandparents. Their family soon grew again as Brenda met a man at work whom she eventually married. She was no longer the young, starry-eyed girl who could fall in love at the sight of a guy on the street. Her relationship with Eugene was more serious and thoughtful. Brenda understood that she was now responsible not just for herself, but also for her son, who was growing up without a father and recently lost his great-grandparents. She couldn't put him through any more hardship. Fortunately, Eugene was a serious man several years older than Brenda and proved to be a reliable and loving partner right from the start. He loved Brenda and was able to accept Reynold as his own, despite his initial wariness of a new man in the house. Thanks to Eugene's friendly and cheerful disposition, Reynold soon saw him as a father figure. The boy started school with a new last name and patronymic after Eugene adopted him. After several more years had passed, the misfortunes and failures of the past slowly faded away into distant memory. However, life had a way of reminding Brenda of everything she had gone through. Just before New Year's Eve, Brenda went to the mall alone to buy new outfits for herself and presents for her husband and son. As she was leaving the mall, she suddenly heard a familiar tune being played. It sounded like a guitar, but as she walked towards the source of the music, she saw that it was her son, Reynold, playing a ukulele. However, something was wrong. In just a couple of hours, her son seemed to have lost several pounds and was dressed like a street urchin, wearing an unseasonable and ill-fitting jacket with blue-dyed hair plucking the strings of the ukulele. The case of the musical instrument lay open in front of him. Reynold. She threw herself at the boy. "What are you doing here? Why? Where's Dad?" "I'm not Reynold, I'm Darcy," the child replied in a cold tone. "My daddy will be here soon, and I don't know you." Brenda had already realized that this wasn't her son, but the resemblance was uncanny. How could someone look so much like Reynold? Sure, there were plenty of people who resembled each other, but this was different. Could it be possible that she, as the birth mother, mistook him for her son? "Who are you?" Brenda asked, trying to gather more information. "Why are you here?" "I perform here for money," the boy answered gruffly. "My daddy will be here soon to pick me up." "Do you always come here?" Brenda asked, hoping to uncover more details. "Always in the evenings," the boy responded, his tone growing increasingly irritable. "Either listen, pay, or get out of here. You're in the way." Brenda rushed home without being aware of herself. When she arrived, she found her son, Reynold, inside the house instead of playing musical instruments outside like his father used to do. Reynold had no interest in music and instead showed a preference for mathematics and chess. Not long after, Brenda's husband returned home, and she immediately went to him, still feeling confused about the strange encounter she had experienced earlier that day. "Why did you leave so quickly, my love?" Eugene asked. "Perhaps you should have stayed and waited for the boy's father. It's possible that he's your first husband, and the boy is his second son." "I don't think Reynold resembles Donald at all. He looks more like me. However, something seems off. Perhaps I had twins, but I don't have any recollection of it. I was unconscious initially and then under anesthesia, and one of the babies was taken away." "Let's not speculate," interjected the listener. "These days, DNA testing is a straightforward process. We can take samples from you, Reynold, and the parents, and that will provide clarity. You and Reynold can take the test whenever you're ready." As for the other family, if they're sending the child to beg on the streets, perhaps money can resolve the situation. We can meet the boy and his father tomorrow and assess the situation. The following day, Brenda and Eugen approached the boy, who was playing in the street once again. Under the guise of a plausible pretext, and with the promise of compensation, they took a mouth swab from him. Eugene, with the help of his acquaintances, sent the samples for testing the same day. The results left them both stunned. Darcy was not Brenda's biological child, nor was Reynold, but the two boys were actually siblings. How is this possible? Brenda exclaimed in confusion. Where is my real son? Was there a mix-up at the hospital? But Darcy never mentioned having a brother. Determined to find answers, Brenda rushed to the maternity hospital where she had given birth 10 years earlier. However, she was met with disappointment as the building had been sold and converted into a private clinic. The archives were lost, and none of the staff who had worked at the old maternity hospital were present. But Brenda refused to leave the situation unanswered. As she searched for clues, she discovered that Donald, her first husband, could potentially shed some light on the mystery. However, there had been no news about him for several years. Through the power of social media, Brenda was able to track down the man she once loved deeply, but who had cruelly betrayed her. She found a phone number on his page, but it was not for the popular pop star Donald that he once dreamed of becoming. Instead, he remained a wandering musician, performing at various events. Brenda called Donald and requested an urgent meeting at a cafe. As he arrived, he already knew why his ex-wife needed to speak with him. Yeah, Brenda, I didn't expect this to come out so soon. Do you know yet? Donald asked. I know that I have an unknown baby who has a twin brother. Do you have any information about my missing son? Brenda replied, trying to control her emotions. He's gone, Brenda. Our baby was stillborn. I convinced the doctors not to inform you, Donald said matter-of-factly. Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you tell me? Brenda asked, struggling to hold back tears. I didn't want to hurt you even more. You were already going through a tough time, and I didn't want you to suffer any more pain. I knew you wouldn't have been able to handle losing both your child and your husband at the same time, Donald explained. Brenda was shocked by his words. She realized that despite his faults, he still cared about her well-being. Okay, you're right. But did you take the baby somewhere, or did you steal it? God, no. At the same time, another woman gave birth to twins. The doctors convinced her to give up her children. She said she had no home or money and was a vagrant. She said she would give up one and keep the other. But I begged the doctors, gave them all the money I had. You must have gotten the money from your philanthropist, but she didn't help you. I wasn't myself at that time, and I didn't want to stay with you. I knew it was the end. I would have done anything to avoid being stuck in that bourgeois swamp with diapers and porridge, especially with someone else's baby. I don't have my own. You must admit, I wasn't the worst wretch, and I tried to console you and give you a parting gift. Is that so bad? Is the boy unhappy growing up with you? He's great. I'm even glad he's not yours. I'm sorry, of course. Yes, please. That's why I stopped paying alimony. I knew he wasn't mine. And I see that you've done a great job. Are you married now? Let's not talk about you or me. Let's talk about what you did with two brothers. What did I do? At least one of them is happy, right? It would be better if both of them were happy. Okay then, Donald. Goodbye. I hope you don't play with anyone else's life like that. Brenda rose from her seat and continued her journey, leaving her ex-husband behind. She needed time to process the news that her son was not her biological child, and that he had a twin brother who was struggling to make ends meet. She couldn't bury her dead child, but she still had a living son, who may not have been hers by blood, but was hers by love. She realized that her life had taken a drastic turn, and that she had been kept in the dark 10 years ago. However, now she knew the truth, and she had the power to change her life and the lives of others. she decided to take action and help the struggling twin brother, who was playing his ukulele in the cold winter. Brenda knew that she couldn't turn back time and undo the past, but she could create a better future for those around her. She made it her mission to support and care for her son and his newfound twin brother. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to make things right and give her boys the life they deserved. With a newfound sense of purpose, Brenda set out to make a difference in the world, one small act of kindness at a time. She knew that she couldn't change the past, but she could shape the future, and that was all that mattered. Brenda recounted the whole story to her husband at home and proposed, "Eugene, I think we should adopt Reynolds' twin brother. I couldn't bear the thought of him wandering out there, possibly starving." Eugene responded, "Brenda, I'm all for it, but we have to be careful. The boy has a father and possibly a mother, even if they're not the best parents. They might not want to give up Darcy easily. We should meet with them and discuss it, maybe even offer them compensation." Brenda cautioned him, "Be careful with what you say. We don't want to be involved in human trafficking. We need to explain our situation to them." Eugene agreed. "It's a complex situation that could take time to resolve, and we don't want it to become public. We'll have to meet with the father and discuss the matter with him. Maybe we can even threaten him, as it's not right for him to exploit his son in this way." The following day, Brenda and Eugene went together to the location where Darcy was often seen playing his ukulele. They were fortunate enough to find Darcy's father there, counting the money he had received from the day's earnings. "Looks like it's getting smaller every day," the father scolded Darcy. "You don't play well, and you don't practice enough. Is it too much to ask for one little thing? You don't eat dinner tonight. You'll go to bed without whining." Darcy turned away, struggling to hold back tears. The father continued, "You needs to eat well and work harder. Otherwise, you'll just get used to half-hearted efforts and continue to warm himself on porches with just enough money for cigarettes." Eugene approached the man and greeted him. "Hey there, my wife and I were hoping we could chat with you. Maybe over a cup of coffee." The man looked suspicious and asked, "What's this about? Who are you?" Noticing the man's hesitance, Eugene quickly assured him, "Don't worry, I'll cover the cost. My name's Richard, and my wife Brenda is here too. We have an offer for you that we think you'll appreciate." The man grumbled but seemed convinced by the mention of payment. "All right, I'll join you," he said, adding, "But I'm not interested in any lectures." Eugene smiled and said, "No lectures, I promise. By the way, what's your name?" The man replied reluctantly, "My name is Darcy, but my wife died a long time ago." Eugene nodded understandingly. "I'm sorry to hear that. Let's head to the cafe, but before we do, why don't we let Darcy here play a bit longer or head home, whatever he prefers?" Darcy agreed, "Yeah, that sounds good. Let's go." Although the conversation was not suitable for young ears, the couple still wanted to ensure that the child was well fed and warm. They ordered pizza, cocoa, and milk for him, and once he had finished his meal, they directed him to the children's corner to play while they attended to their adult matters. Brenda then began to share her story with Richard, including details about her son Reynold, and even showed him a picture. "Wow!" exclaimed Richard in amazement. "That means my partner had twins. I had no idea. I was in jail when she gave birth, and when I got out, the kids were already 2 years old. 2 sons. A couple of years later, she was poisoned by something, and I've been the only one raising them since then. And now you want me to give up Darcy too?" Brenda shook her head. "No, that's not what we're proposing. We actually want to adopt Darcy so that he can grow up with his brother, but only if you're willing to give him up for adoption." The man's response was unexpected. "Oh, really? And why should I give up my child? I could just have another one," he said, with a hint of greed in his voice. Eugene was taken aback by the man's reaction. "Why do you need another child when it seems like having one is already a burden for you?" Eugene asked, trying to understand the man's perspective. What do you mean burden? We have a normal life, and my son is everything to me. He's my flesh and blood, so I don't quite understand what you're asking from me, the man replied defensively. Brenda chimed in. We're not asking for him, we're asking to adopt him. We believe that he would have a better life with us. We can provide him with education, development, and a loving family. The man was unconvinced. Are you suggesting that I'm incapable of providing those things for my son? We may not have everything, but we take care of each other. I teach him valuable skills, like how to work and appreciate the value of money. He helps me out as much as he can, and I can't imagine life without him. Let's just leave things as they are. Eugen noticed the desperation on Brenda's face and realized that Richard was stubborn. He spoke calmly. Richard, it is your right to refuse us, but we will not give up. We will report you and Darcy to the guardianship, and you will not only lose parental rights, but also face charges for neglecting your responsibilities as a parent. However, we can settle this matter quietly and to our mutual satisfaction. How much money does your son earn per month? Richard named a relatively small amount, and Eugen did some quick calculations. He then offered Richard a lump sum of money that his son could earn in 10 years. This is the money we will give you up front, and in exchange, you will give us Darcy's documents and sign the waiver. Do we have a deal? Eugen asked. When will I receive the money? Richard asked, still skeptical. Tomorrow morning. I am not sure, but my son is still my son, and somehow we have grown accustomed to each other. However, I must admit that I do not bring any good to his life. Despite this, I still wish him the best. Eugen expressed his happiness and remarked, It's amazing how everything falls into place when you start thinking logically. Brenda let out a sigh and wiped her tears away. We need to inform Darcy, Brenda stated firmly. Darcy, come over here, Richard called out, beckoning the young boy towards him. These people would like to take you to their home. You have a twin brother there, Reynold. Darcy was taken aback. Are you saying for good? Yes, Darcy, we are adopting you. Your brother Reynold is waiting for you there. I will explain everything later, but please, can we count on your agreement? Brenda said, her voice breaking with emotion. Darcy turned to his father. And what about you? I don't mind, Darcy. All I want is for you to be happy. You'll have a mom and dad who will treat you well. You can study and play music there and have fun with your brother. What's wrong with that? Richard explained. I don't know, Darcy replied, feeling conflicted. It was difficult for him to leave the only life he had ever known. Evgeny proposed, Why don't you come over to our house tonight and meet your brother? Then you can decide for yourself. Richard hesitated. You're moving too quickly. You want to take him away now and then look for you. Evgeny reassured him. Darcy is not a little boy. He knows where he lives. Alternatively, we can go together, and you can see for yourself that we're telling the truth. While Darcy was sent to meet his brother at the house, the adults remained to work out their own issues. I don't want the boy to know that money is my main motivation here. Let him believe what he wants. And don't worry, I won't come after you for more, Richard said as he counted the money he had received. To be honest, I'm not entirely certain if Darcy is even my biological son. His mother was a real character, but you have a good thing going here. I'll say my goodbyes to him, if that's all right with you. He peered into the children's room and called out to his son, It's true. You can't tell. So Darcy, do you want to stay here? Are you okay with it? No, Daddy, I don't mind. Will you come back to see me? Darcy replied with a hint of eagerness in his voice. Maybe we'll see each other again. We're friends, not strangers, Richard responded, though it was evident that he was preoccupied with his own plans for the near future and the money in his pocket rather than the fate of his son. Come on, study hard, don't be lazy, and behave yourself. Richard hurriedly left the room. Meanwhile, the newly formed family members began to reintroduce themselves, and Darcy's new parents quickly arranged a space for him. Oh dear, this was too easy. I'm not even sure what we need to do next. We have to handle the paperwork, right? What if that Richard guy spends the money and doesn't give up Darcy? She said, expressing her concerns. Don't worry, he won't get Darcy back. It's Saturday, so we'll deal with the paperwork on Monday, he assured her. And look at how well Reynold has a lot of clothes. Darcy is almost the same size, except they're a bit too big. On Monday, it was revealed that Darcy was now an orphan. Richard, having received a large sum of money, decided to throw a banquet for his friends, and didn't bother to hide his newfound wealth from them. It remains unclear who was responsible for his death, but on Monday morning, Richard's body was found in his apartment. This made it easier for Eugene and Brenda to obtain custody of Darcy and eventually adopt him. The family celebrated their first New Year's Eve together in their new apartment. Eugene and Brenda had to purchase a larger home as the boys continued to grow, and they even began to consider having another child. Darcy and Reynold remained close friends from the moment they met, and it came as no surprise that the family's only child had a twin brother. They couldn't imagine life without each other,